that makes sense. So, okay, let's talk about a couple of things. So, firstly, I noticed earlier when you were talking about different forms of hate across the world, you said racism, and then you said anti-Asian discrimination, which I would call racism.
Yes, yes.
Would you call that
Yes,
racism?
yes.
So, okay, so that's interesting. So if a this is a lack one. So if a black person were to hate an Asian because they're Asian, is that racism?
In terms of hating because they're Asian.
Yeah.
Yes.
So black people can be racist, just not towards white people.
No. That's taking what I said out of context, right?
Okay, so let's put it into context. So we've already had this discussion where you said that black people can't be racist because racist is a system. Racism has a lot of context behind it. It has a lot of oppression behind it. So now, if an Asian
with oppression which has still adapted into today's society, right?
Yes.
Which was why I brought up anti-blackness and anti-Asian discrimination, right? Which we've seen a lot of
in
now
the US,
with
yes.
the pandemic, right? Not just in the US, like the whole thing of people saying, "Oh no, it's not coronavirus, it's Chinese virus," which is discrimination, right? And so what I'm gonna say is that the thing about racism, which is what gets me as to why I say groups that are marginalized economically and on a systemic level can't be racist. That's why I wouldn't necessarily say that is racism, but it's discrimination, which the root of that discrimination comes from the larger system of racism.
Okay, so I think we're actually I think we're getting somewhere because I'm now
clarifying it clearly.
I'm sort of coming at this from a few different angles, and I think we're getting somewhere. So you're saying
you ought to think of racism as the root, which is it's bigger than what we think it is. It's a machine. It's a machine that has an engine. Every machine that exists has an engine, which is where it starts, right? And the engine, that starting point, is what keeps it running, right? And a machine has people that build it, as well as people that continue to maintain it, that drivers of it. And then there's panels on the machine that hold the machine together and ensure the constant existence of that machine because they're holding it together. Now think of anti-blackness. Think of anti-Asian discrimination as those panels that continue to hold it together because it continues and allows the existence of discrimination on the basis of race and ethnicity it allows for its existence in society. Think of those as panels, right? Panels which form part of this bigger system at hand, but are not the engine, but they are the panels.
Okay, so who is this system benefiting? Because I feel like the automatic answer to that question is white people.
Yes.
White people are benefiting from the system. But now let me go back to my previous question. If a black person is benefiting from this machine, does that mean that
in
this
what
black
sense?
So okay, so we'll go
Do you
back
want to talk about if black privilege exists as opposed to white privilege?
We can get to that.
Okay.
We definitely can. But right now I want to talk about the question that I had previously, which is if same situation that we discussed earlier, but or in fact remove our previous example, we'll just go straight to the US right now, which is what's happening in the US is that Asian people are getting attacked, killed in some cases. There's a lot of racism towards Asian people, and the people who are committing these acts of racism come from all races, or all of the races that are predominant in the US. So there's a lot of black people in the US. I think they make up like 14-15%. There's a lot of white people. There's a lot of Hispanic people in the US. All of them, or some individuals from all of these groups are being racist towards Asians. So if a white person hates an Asian person because they're Asian, is that racist? Just yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, if a Hispanic person hates an Asian because they're Asian, is that racist?
This is what I said. This is why I said no, is because
Oh.
no. Listen, it's not because we're not getting anywhere. It's because this is why I brought up the example of the machine, right? This is why I brought up the example of the machine and why I explained systemic and structural racism and why I spoke of the power dynamic. The power dynamic is very important because that actually determines whether it is racist or not. And
Okay,
now, when you
so
think of the example of America, when you think of that structurally, power predominantly has been in the hands of white people, right? From the policing system to many other facets of society, and which is why I said that it can't be racist, right? Because of the power dynamic. And now, if someone doesn't have power, then it doesn't make it racism, but rather discrimination because of the power dynamic thing, right? And so if it comes from a person who is equally marginalized and doesn't have power, doesn't have economic power, doesn't have resource power, doesn't have decision making power as well, right? Then I wouldn't say it's racist, but it's discrimination, right?
So does that
Discrimination
okay?
that stems from
So
racism.
I'm actually so glad you've said that, because now you've said that discrimination from a person who has power to a person who doesn't have power, that is racism. Discrimination from a person who doesn't have power to a person who doesn't have power, that's just prejudice. Okay?
Prejudice, hate, and discrimination.
So who has power? Who are the groups of people? Because we could go through
Globally,
a long list of all the different races, but I'm sure there's only one, which is white people,
it's
right?
obvious. White male figures in particular, to be specific, and to add another layer to it, then you'd say heterosexual white men, to add another layer to it.
Okay, so I find this quite interesting. So on the way here,